At the end of the last video, I said I was going to talk about rendering in this video, but I just remembered I wanted to talk a little bit about uh, adaptivity and how we can optimize our simulations to get smaller caches and quicker sim times. Um, so the first thing I'm going to mention is in the Aero solver settings, we have a thing called simulation bounds. And if you say, I've got a camera here, say I knew that I'd already had a camera set up and I was only going to see this amount of the explosion in my render, and everything above here is not going to be seen. What you can do is you can try and hide this. You can make a cube which, go to the perspective view, it's covering the whole area of the sim that is seen by the camera. So it's sort of, I mean, I could make it a little bit higher at the back there. Let's just see if it lets me do it. It's been a bit, it's got a bit quicker now. So like something like that. So if you look at the side view, everything here wouldn't be simmed. It would just be cut off. So basically what it does is it limits the simulation to the inside of this cube. So all this would never have been simmed, but all this would have stayed the same because it just cuts it off there, and everything after there just stops simming. So all this would stay as it was, as it were. You won't get a change. The only thing to sort of point out with using the simulation bounds is that if you say you've simmed out a bit and you think, well, actually I'm not going to see any of that because of the camera, so I'm going to bring this cube in and I'm going to sort of crop it down like that because I know that all this is well inside there. And you go to your camera and you have a look. If you're a bit too close to the sort of explosion with your bounds, you will end up getting a different effect, or you might even find out that it just sort of dies out. And this, I think, is, oh, just move the camera. This is because, obviously, even though these are empty areas, they are full of air and values which the simulation is taking in. And if you do crop too close, it will start altering the way the sim works. So you want to give it, you know, a bit of room around it when you do use the simulation bounds. They're really very good for, you know, cutting off this top bit that you don't really need to see. And I find that actually it's these areas up here which seem to take, you know, start making the sim take a lot longer, because obviously you're making a bigger and bigger area to be simulated. So that's the first thing, and how you would make that work is, just gonna let me drag over. Nope, it's that one. You'd drag your cube in like this. It may have a think about it, and then you would just drag and connect the cube to your simulation bounds, and now everything outside of that will be ignored. I think this is having a think about it now. The other thing I want to talk about is that the adaptivity node, once this stops freezing, I might pause very quickly. Right, so I'm just going to pause this because I think because my file cache is about 2.5 gig, when I'm trying to make changes in the graph, it's being quite slow. So just to sort of reiterate that, I would just drag that into there, and then nothing outside of this will be simulated. Let's have a quick look at the adaptivity. So the first thing to say is that at the moment I don't think this is working properly in this first release. When you turn this on, it's supposed to sort of auto either coarsen things like the interior or areas of low disturbance. So it sort of up-reses the sort of less detailed things, you know, giving you sort of quicker sims because it's lower resolutions, as it were. So it sort of basically coarsens low fog detail, low disturbance, or the interior of an explosion. At the moment, when you turn it on, it affects the look of the sim quite a lot, considering what it's not really supposed to do much, change it in that much, but it is. So I've not been using it. I think in the next release I'm going to try and fix this. You could just turn it on from the very beginning and then just work with it, as it were, to sort of change your settings to accommodate this from the very beginning, and then you wouldn't have that change if you turned it on halfway through, sort of tweaking a sim. But I'm not going to talk about that or use at the moment. I'm just going to talk about this enable resolution bounds, which can be quite handy. So I'm just going to hide this cube and unhide these two cubes. So let's hide that other camera. So what I've decided is I'm going to render my let me just turn on this so we see the explosion. I might pause that again because it's going to take a while to pop up. Right, so this is going to be the camera I'm going to render from, sort of straight on to the explosion. And if I go into a side view, yeah, so there's my camera. So that's the front of my simulation, and this is going to be the back. I've made two cubes. One's called full res, and you can see this is at the front. And if I go to the top view, you see it covers the whole front area that's going to be seen by the camera here. And then I made another cube called quarter res, which covers the back of the simulation. And we have in this, we have these slots for base resolution, which is the full res, half, quarter, and eighth. So if I turn this on and I plug the full into the full res one, the base resolution, and I plug the quarter into the quarter res, the front of the simulation will have all the full detail, but the back will only have a quarter of it. And I can sort of show you a visual representation of this because I did the same thing with my previous sim here. So we can see here with the right view, this is the front of the simulation, and then you can see the back, and you see it's a lot coarser and a lot less detailed and quite soft, especially in like the smoke here. I mean, the detail there compared to there is completely different. And we can see that in the left view as well. That's the rear view. So this is just the back, so you can see it's all quite low. And then the left view, we've got the same again. We've got high detail here and in the front, and then we've got this low detail in the back. And this will, obviously keep sim sizes a bit lower because this will be simmed at a quarter of the res of the front. Keep our file sizes down and hopefully make it sim a bit quicker. So just to plug those in, I'm just going to re-pause because when you try and do something with this cache in there at the moment, it's being quite slow. So I'm just going to pause my graph. I'm going to drag in my full res like that. Just plug that into the base. Do my quarter. Plug that into my quarter resolution, which is that one. And then I don't need to see those in the viewport anymore. Just hide those. Just go back to my camera I'm going to render from. And the only other thing I want to do before I finally sim this out is I'm just going to up my burn rate just a little bit more to 0.14 just to get a bit more oomph. Right, so I'm just going to rewind that. I'm going to unpause. And then I'm going to start simming. And then in the next video we will start talking about rendering.